When the sun rose the next morning, it was the 1st of May, and they all sang the Internationale. When the sun rose the next morning, it was the 1st of May, and they all sang the Internationale. They all sang the Internationale. Völker, hört die Signale auf zum letzten Gefecht. Die Internationale erkämpft das Menschenrecht. Völker, hört die Signale auf zum letzten Gefecht. Die Internationale erkämpft das Menschenrecht.
Good evening and welcome to the Revolutionary Socialist Review. This is Chris Driscoll, and with me tonight is our co-host, Rainer Shea. Hello, Rainer. How are you?
Hello. I've been figuring some things out since our podcast last week, and specifically the connotations of a certain term that I used last week, and that you implicitly endorsed by not correcting me. Apparently, we both didn't know that the term Viet Cong is derogatory towards Vietnamese communists, because I mean, look
I don't
at how
remember
much
you saying saying that nasty V word. I don't remember you saying it, but must have slipped by me. Anyway, yes, it's a simple thing. Viet Cong was a nasty, it's, like squaw. Some racist pig calls a Native American woman a squaw. It's kind of like calling a white woman the C word, So no, it's not a good thing. And yeah, that is the National Liberation Front of Vietnam, the Vietnamese National Liberation Front. I don't know if I'm getting it confused, but that's the way we tend to refer to our valiant, brave, stupendous comrades in the Chinese Communist Party. I mean, the Vietnamese Communist Party.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard that it's called metapolitics, where certain words are inserted into a culture, and you look up the name of the Vietnamese army, the North Vietnamese army, and Google says Viet Cong, Wikipedia says it, and it's so ubiquitous. So it's just the colloquial thing that I picked up after growing up.
When I was a kid, everybody in America called the National Liberation Front of Vietnam. They called it that word, so it gets in people's heads, and that's what these fuckers do. They determine the language because they control the media that controls 95%, according to reliable statistics, of what we see, hear, read, watch on TV, whatever, TV, cable, radio, internet. It's ubiquitous, so it's insidious. And I think it's a good thing for us to go through word by word the words we use, the terms we use, and determine their origins and what their meaning is, and how much of this shit is psychological warfare, brutal psychological warfare on us, on the working class worldwide. And that's what we're seeing. So good point. Good correction. And right up top, too, you're not like the fucking New York Times. that waits to page like 47 to put their corrections, you know, from last Tuesday. Anyway, how's the weather? I understand now what you mean by it's looking orange, because it's gotten orange here in Phoenix too. The weather from the smoke from you guys has descended upon us.
Yeah, well, the smoke level in Humboldt County where I am is a little bit better, but it seems like it's going to keep being toxic on some level for the next couple of weeks, and people are kind of afraid to go out. It's a crisis within a crisis.
If COVID-19 weren't already keeping you in, I gotcha. That is sad, but yeah, global warming. It's very simple. It's hotter and hotter. People, for some reason, the politically correct liberals insist on calling this climate change. Well, climate change is a normal thing that has been with us for, 3 billion years of our 4.5 billion history. We've had climate change. Climate change is normal and natural. We want climate change. So I have no clue why these idiots call it climate change. Yeah, the climate's always changing. That's good. That's life. It's been changing for eons and eons. This is global warming we're talking about. The globe, on average, is warming up. Like a half a degree C so far in the last couple hundred years, and probably an additional of 2% C by the time we get past this century. So it's pretty bad, and it's really changing our weather. It's causing a lot more fires, as we can see, as anyone in Arizona or Utah or Colorado or especially California can see. We have a lot more worse wildfires. Also, we have really bad hurricanes, very destructive, that are more frequent and more powerful and more violent. We've got another one coming in to slam into Mississippi and Louisiana. I don't know if it's already hit, but it's coming within the next day, I'm pretty sure. So it's a terrible thing, and the Democrat and Republican politicians, the liberal and conservative politicians, fascistic politicians, more and more, they are, the conservative side just denies it. They say, no, this isn't going on. Close your eyes, pretend it's not there. And the Democrats say, oh, yes, we got to do something really frantically. We got to do something now. And yet, when they get together to actually pass legislation or to pass international treaties, it turns out nothing was done. No forward motion. We, by now, 50 years on through, since people have started to understand this crisis, by now we should have all, and that's one of the topics tonight, Michael Moore's Planet of the Humans is cherry-picked bullshit. We should by now, our entire country and the entire world should be functioning on alternative energy, clean energy sources, and it's not. And there's no reason for it other than capitalism. Capitalism is the cause. So maybe we should begin with the show's actual agenda of topics. Topic number one, Rainer, is China calls the American empire the greatest threat to peace in the South China Sea, as U.S. puppets, India and Japan sign a new war pact. This is getting kind of dire, especially in the South China Sea. The Chinese Foreign Ministry this morning made these remarks about the United States being the greatest threat to peace in the South China Sea. And they are so true. All you've got to do is look at it, the provocative moves that the United States is taking with its fleets of ships that it's deliberately pointing towards and moving towards as though it's going to ram into Chinese territorial waters. It's basically an invasion of Chinese waters. They do this with their aircraft carriers, their ships, their fighter jets and bombers, and they continuously do it. There's just an incident a few days ago where U.S. bombers came perilously close to Chinese airspace and had to be escorted the fuck out of there by Chinese fighter jets. And they keep doing this. Now, this was very common during Cold War 1.0 back in the day, between China and the US and between Russia and the US. And they kind of got into into it as though it were a norm, kind of got used to it. And this time it seems that all that old bad shit has all come back with a vengeance, even worse, and we really need to do something about it. Meanwhile, India and Japan over the weekend signed a pact, a war pact basically, aimed at China. And it's very obvious that this was instigated by the American empire that pulls the strings of Japan and India and has been pushing Japan and India into provocations along with the American provocations against the Chinese people. We'll have lots more to say tonight about China, but let me stop there and hear what you have to say on this first news.
In the last year, the sort of climax of this this imperialist reaction to the coming of the multipolar world has been taking shape, as the United States has been moving to retreat from the Middle East to a certain extent, while gathering more of its forces in the areas surrounding China. And it's been getting Australia to build up its military, and it's been using India as a military buffer against China. And in 2020 so far, there have been some close calls, as and yes, they've definitely been escalating their advancement in the South China Sea in particular, amid this long time campaign of trying to encircle China and of trying to, well, let's try to figure out what exactly are they trying to accomplish with this, aside from trying to intimidate China into not defying the United States as much. It seems like they're trying to shore up certain resources in the South China Sea, or well, this was what Obama's pivot to Asia was about, wasn't it?
Exactly. This started with Obama. Bush has been much more like Obama than people realize. And every move he makes against China and every move he makes against Russia, against Iran, against Libya and Lebanon and Syria, against any country that opposes US imperialism and doesn't want to buckle under to the jackbooted thugs of the US empire, they are targeted. They have been targeted. Venezuela. We'll be talking at the end of the show about Nicaragua as another example, where regime change is their objective. Regime change is even their objective in Russia and China, as absurd as that is, because the Russian and Chinese people will not allow that to happen. However, those people are very aware of what US imperialism is, of its fascistic nature, its highly repressive, brutal, violent nature, and they want no fucking part of it. So, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Right. You mentioned regime change in Russia, and some ominous developments have been coming up where the U.S. has been grooming this far right leader who they claim has been poisoned by Putin, even though there's this doesn't really make sense. And apparently they want to install a Russian fascist to the right of Putin in order to make Russia into the U.S. asset that it was during the Yeltsin era. So this is their vision for Russia, which is a terrifying vision. I thankfully I doubt that Russia's political system will allow this to happen. I doubt Russians will overwhelmingly elect fascists unless they can somehow figure out a coup.
Yeah. They don't have the troops to do this on their own. That's the American imperialists. They don't have the friends with the troops. They're trying to push Japan, for instance, into building up its army, which, in the past, people were more fearful of Japanese imperialism because of what it did in the 20th century prior to its defeat in 1945. And people ever since then have really been comforted by the fact that Japan was, relatively speaking, non-militarized. Now it is becoming more and more so. We see this latest announcement this morning of a war pact between India and Japan as just the latest indication that the United States of America empire has been pushing Japan into these moves. The U.S. empire has also been pushing India into provocative moves on the Indian-Chinese border. That is actually attacking Chinese border guards and PLA, that's People's Liberation Army, Chinese PLA troops along the border, especially in the contested zone between those two countries. This is really obnoxious, annoying, and extremely dangerous because, as I like to point out, and I think should be pointed out often, this stuff can spiral out of control and you can end up in a nuclear holocaust, destroying planet Earth. at least destroying all sentient life on planet Earth. And actually, planet Earth will be just fine no matter what, even through a nuclear holocaust. Planet Earth will be fine. There'll be life on planet Earth. It'll just be microbial life and, maybe small critters, maybe some fish, but no humans. So it's a terrible, terrible thing. Anyway, moving on to the second point. Julian Assange, the hearing going on in London to determine whether he will be extradited to the United States. The American empire is eager eager to murder Assange. We'll see how that goes, but they are eager to get their brutal hands on Assange. So the trial picked up last week after having been postponed for several months. And I reported last week on what had happened so far since last Wednesday when we last recorded. The Assange hearing came back to order on Thursday morning, and they heard one witness who did a great job, actually, of dismantling key elements of the government case against Assange. This witness, he is, I draw a blank with the name, but he is the head of it's something like the Free Press Foundation or something to that effect. Is an American, he's the executive director of that organization. He's he's an American attorney, and he testified, basically testifying that the government's case is based on the idea of prosecuting Assange for publishing classified information in the same way that the New York Times or the London Guardian or the Washington Post have done, and pointing out that Assange is a journalist, is a publisher, and should be treated that way, and made a pretty good case in court to that effect. The American lawyers who were there did not make a very good case, so that's good. But unfortunately, the judge in this case, the British judge, seems to be highly prejudiced against Julian Assange. So anyway, on Thursday, the hearing had to be called off and postponed once again. It was postponed until this morning, Monday morning, because of a COVID-19 threat where one of the lawyers had been exposed to COVID-19, and so they wanted to stop everything and test him. He was tested. Thank the gods that he was all right. He did not have COVID-19, so the hearing picked up this morning. Another defense person, another defense witness, who was also another attorney from the United States, came on and testified that Julian Assange is a legitimate journalist, is a legitimate publisher. That's pretty obvious to anybody who looks at it. I don't see how anyone could contest that, although the American side, the American imperialists who are trying to extradite do contest that. So, and then once again, the hearing had to be postponed prior to noon this afternoon, London time, because of some TV journalists who had played out loud in court footage about the Assange trial, which of course, exposed stuff that wasn't supposed to be exposed even to the judge hearing the case. And the defense attorneys and the prosecution attorneys threw their arms up in the air. They were angry. And the judge postponed once again the hearing. I have no idea when the hearing's going to come back, but that's where we stand for the time being.
Yeah. Then I've been following this for a couple years, and it's such a it's such a deviation. It's so dissonant from the image of a healthy liberal democracy that the Western powers behind this persecution try to put forth for themselves. They present themselves as the global paragons of functioning legal systems and the upholders of liberties and the protectors of free expression, but they do this to whistleblowers. They do this to journalists. Assange is far from the only one. Around a year ago, I think it was Max Blumenthal who was arrested baselessly for reporting on imperialist machinations in Venezuela, and Chelsea Manning has been tortured, and Edward Snowden would be tortured if they were able to get him. And there's been really a deterioration of press freedom since 9/11 in the U.S. especially. And it's really dissonant from the image that these powers present, try to pass themselves off as, and it further shows the illegitimacy of the U.S. NATO imperialist bloc, and it shows how the revolutions need to sweep these countries. We need to build opposition to the capitalist powers that have committed the crimes which Assange exposed. Remember that all of this comes from the fact that Assange's WikiLeaks, I think it was 10 years ago, exposed these horrific war crimes that the U.S. had committed in Iraq. And apparently this is such a big deal for the imperialists that they're absolutely determined to make Assange into an example, so that they can rule by secrecy into the indefinite future.
Right. Exactly. Okay. That was Assange. Number 3, Russia attempts to reduce tensions between China and India. Of course, I just mentioned the tensions between China and India, which have come to blows, and a number of Chinese and Indian army and border guards have lost their lives in this violence so far. Both sides agreed to go to Moscow over the weekend. They met. They've come up with some kind of a solution, hopefully, and we'll find out more certainly by next week. But that's the news so far.
Oh, it makes sense given how Russia and China they've really been increasing their sense of military allyship within the last year, and this is the result of the ever increasing Cold War escalations that the U.S. has been carrying out against both Russia and China. So it certainly makes sense that Russia is trying to mediate now, and really Russia and China are two of the biggest upholders of world peace. It's extremely important that Russia has become defiant of the United States within these last 20 years. If imagine if Russia were still a U.S. proxy state.
Exactly. Okay, moving right along. We're doing pretty good on time, at least. Oracle and TikTok announced the deal on Sunday, yesterday, actually. That is an attempt to restructure TikTok and not to eliminate ByteDance. ByteDance, of course, is the parent company of TikTok in China. It's a Chinese company. And of course, ByteDance has been the real target. So the American assets of TikTok will hopefully, if this deal is acceptable to the Trump regime, which had given TikTok 30 days to get out of town, if this is acceptable, then the Oracle, Larry Ellison, of course, CEO of the infamous Larry Ellison, who thinks that he's a samurai and his whole house is decked out with samurai swords. And the guy's obviously batshit crazy and insane. But in this case, well, good on Larry Ellison and Oracle. Oracle's one of the 4 or 5 largest software companies in the United States, so it's a big deal. And they have agreed to enter this deal in which they will become partners with ByteDance. ByteDance will still hold part ownership of TikTok. And I think they didn't actually explicitly say this, but I think that part of this deal would be that the coveted algorithms, that is what Oracle obviously is after, and what Microsoft was after, and Microsoft had hoped that they would be taking possession of TikTok's American assets. But sorry, Bill Gates, you're fucked in this deal. So anyway, I have my doubts as to whether the Trump regime will even accept this deal, because it still allows ByteDance a minority ownership in its TikTok American assets. We'll see how it goes, but we'll be definitely presenting more on this important issue. This, as we've pointed out many times in the past, the Trump regime is exhibiting the same kind of state piracy. And that's exactly what this is. This is highway robbery. This is piracy. They want to steal the TikTok in America, the American assets of TikTok, from from China and from the Chinese company that owns it. This is something that if there were real international law, the American empire today would be dragged into the docket in The Hague to face charges for this act of brutal piracy. But so far, that hasn't happened. And I'm not holding my breath. So TikTok, Oracle deal, what do you think, Rainer?
Oh, well, it seems like it further shows how like we've discussed in the past, how Trump's attempts at maneuvering towards stealing TikTok, they haven't exactly gone ideally for him. In fact, they've for the most part gone in the opposite way. You've mentioned how because these algorithms aren't going to be available in the U.S. It's complicated, but basically it's going to end up hurting the U.S. tech industry, and the economic benefits aren't exactly going to suddenly be transferred to the U.S. Just because Trump is doing this swipe, and it's really just going to end up partially hurting TikTok, while ultimately crippling the U.S. further.
Yeah. So, well, we'll see if this is acceptable to the Trump regime. As I said, I doubt it, but we'll find out soon. And in the meantime, let's move on. Topic 5. Michael Moore's Planet of the Humans is cherry-picked bullshit. Now, this has been a huge controversy over the last 4 months since this film came out. We haven't talked about it until now mainly because it was, I knew about it, but it wasn't quite on my radar. And over the weekend, I had my weekly Zoom chat or Zoom party, as we call it, Saturday afternoon Zoom party with my commie friends from back in the DC area, and many of whom are all over, scattered to the 4 winds now. And this was a big topic of discussion. A couple of my friends who are all into the environmental movement and deep ecology and, the real very dedicated environmentalists. They really like this Michael Moore movie. I and everybody else there who are communists, these two are not communists, but everybody else on the Zoom call are communists. So to the typical communist, this Michael Moore Planet of the Humans, when you watch it, I've seen just bits and pieces of it. I haven't watched the whole thing. I probably will sometime, but not looking forward to it. It is anti-technology, anti-science, anti-intellectualism. I mean, it really dovetails with a lot of the agenda of the far right, of the Trumpite right, if you think about it. And it's no surprise that Breitbart, you know about Breitbart.
Of course.
Yeah, you've heard of Breitbart. Notorious right-wing outfit, publishing outfit. Breitbart highly endorsed Michael Moore's Planet of the Humans film, which tells you a little bit about how the deep ecology kind of monkey wrenching environmentalist movement, the anti-technology environmentalist movement, is dovetailing with the Trumpite right wing. It doesn't surprise me at all. However, this film has been soundly and repeatedly debunked by serious climate scientists, physicists, technologists, because the film makes these outrageous bullshit claims that the clean technologies, the alternative energy technologies of today, the clean energy technologies, are just as polluting, just as bad as burning fossil fuel. And to prove their point in the film, they use all of these clips from 10 and 12 years ago, from the technology of 10 and 12 years ago, which is absurd, of course. The technology in like solar panels or wind or thermal or several others of these alternative clean technologies, the technologies have improved by leaps and bounds. So it's absurd for them to cherry pick examples from, like for instance, they had this 12-year-old clip from a festival that takes place in the state of New York, I believe, showing how people can go solar and go clean alternative energy in their homes and so forth. So this festival, every year, it's been pretty successful. However, for the year, I think it was 2008, there was a rainstorm. Well, these Luddite anti-science dimbos say, yeah, solar doesn't work in the rain, as though there aren't batteries, as though the battery technologies had not grown by leaps and bounds over the last decade and more. So the film has been soundly, roundly debunked by legitimate scientists, climate scientists who understand that without these clean energy technologies, we are fucked. And that the clean energy technologies are the only way to save this planet. So anyway, there you go. I don't know if you've seen any of this stuff yet.
I have. It certainly signifies a trend with Michael Moore and what Michael Moore represents, which is kind of obnoxious liberalism that that takes observations like that might have some truth in them, like green energy technologies have somewhat complicated consequences, and we need to improve green energy technologies. He takes this grain of truth and spins it into a long self-righteous rant and that that distorts the facts to make this this really disingenuous point, and that ends up helping the people at Breitbart, that ends up helping the fossil fuel companies that Michael Moore himself hates. So it's not based in material reality like your communist friends are able to recognize. Communism is based in recognizing material reality, whereas these types of liberal analyses, I honestly don't understand them. I don't understand how people like Michael Moore are thinking, but it's not healthy, and it's not productive.
It's not healthy and it's not productive. I've got to say, I have not liked Michael Moore for a long time. I really don't like him. And I'll tell you, the time prior to 1996, that was the year. Prior to that, Michael Moore had done his Roger and Me show, which was kind of entertaining. He followed Roger, whatever the fuck his name was, the CEO of GM, around in his hometown of Flint, Michigan. And he did a funny movie. It won a lot of awards. It got him a lot of attention. Well, in 1996, I had been for about 5 years at that point affiliated with the Labor Party Advocates, LPA, an organization begun by Tony Mazzocchi, who had been the Treasury Secretary of the Oil, Atomic, and Chemical Workers Union. He had been made famous because one of his good buddies, a person that I know, was one of the screenwriters on the movie Silkwood, and modeled the union guy in Silkwood after Tony. So he became like kind of infamous for that. And Tony actually did know Karen Silkwood very well and worked with her, went through all the shit of her being murdered by Kerr McGee, the nuclear company, because of what she had found out about Kerr McGee covering up safety hazards, cracks in fuel cells that were being used in nuclear energy generators. So Karen Silkwood, wonderful human being, murdered. Tony knew her and had worked with her. Anyway, long story short, 5 years after 1991, early 1991, when the Labor Party Advocates was formed, it was a committee. I was a founding member of it. It was a committee to attempt to create a British or Australian, New Zealand style Labor Party. That is a Labor Party that had got all of its money and foot soldiers and so forth through affiliations of the unions in the United States. Well, we never got that far with LPA. At the height, I'd say about maybe 1/12 of the union movement in the United States belonged. And you need a lot more than that. You need more than half to really create a Labor Party, because the Labor Party is going to have to go up against two political parties that are owned and controlled and funded by the capitalist class. The reason why labor parties have been the only type of organization that has been able to become successful workers' parties around the world in the places where they've been formed is that union affiliation. Without that union affiliation, you're fucked, because you're just like the fucking Socialist Party of America, or Socialist Party USA now they call it, that has no funding. No funding, they're a duck, a dead duck. They're nowhere, they're nothing, at least electorally, and that's, Americans expect political parties to be electoral. Even now, when political parties, when the overwhelming majority of Americans have lost all faith in the electoral system, there's still that kind of expectation that political parties will be electoral. That's why we need to create now another kind of organization, not your old-fashioned electoral political party, but a political organization that is modeled on the Leninist political party. You don't have to call it a party. You can call it something else, so we won't confuse Americans. But you know, we need a revolutionary organization that organizes for the revolution. Anyway, back to my story. In 1996, all the members of LPA across the country were all demanding, you know, let's just get on with it. Let's launch a labor party. You know, look, we've got like 12, 13 major unions that are members already, you know, which that's, like I said, only like a 12th of the labor movement in the United States. So it's not enough. But in 1996, in August, I think it was, there was a convention. I can't remember exactly where. The convention was probably in, I think it was in Pittsburgh. That's where it was. Founding convention of the Labor Party. The Labor Party was declared. It was formed in 1996. Michael Moore was one of the featured speakers at the convention. Michael Moore was, you know, a card-carrying member of LPA, and he was a card-carrying member of the Labor Party when it existed up until Tony's death in 2002. And Moore gets up and gives this absurd speech about why it is that all you people are fucked up. You know, he's talking to a crowd of like 1,500 Labor Party members, many of whom are representatives from huge unions around the country. Not only just the LPA members, but the people who were observers, you know, people who were thinking about becoming members, like SEIU, which is got their heads so far up the Democrat Party ass that they can't see. They were an observer, and a couple others like that were observer organizations. But he's telling all these people, you know, you people are so fucked up. So I can go out and create and form a demonstration and get 300, 400 people like that. And he shows this film footage of when he went out a few days before and just impromptu decided to, you know, put out the word in Flint, Michigan to all his Flint lovers, Flint Michael Moore lovers, that were holding a demonstration against blah, blah, blah. And 300-400 people faithfully show up because he's fucking Michael Moore and very well known, you know. And, you know, why can't the Labor Party and all of you labor organizations get out there and, you know, hold mass demonstrations in Washington, D.C.? Well, the labor movement on occasion has held mass demonstrations in Washington, D.C. Last one I remember was, it was called Solidarity Day or something like that in 1980, I think it was, which had 250,000 people at it. So the labor movement, if it wants to, can pull all those people out. Even 1/12 of the labor movement could probably pull out 30, 40, 50,000 people in Washington, D.C. if they really put an effort into it. But, you know, to blame the Labor Party, which is just coming into existence right then and there, it went over like a lead balloon, as it should. Ever since then, I've thought of Michael Moore as being a jerk, not too intelligent. I've never thought he was very intelligent. He's very funny, but maybe that's kind of the thing. The funny guy's got to be, you know, not so smart. Maybe he's just, all his smarts are devoted to making jokes instead. I don't know. Whatever. You know, I've never liked Moore. So anyway, anything more on Moore?
Well, like what I've come to notice about Moore's political line, there's the essential problem with what Moore represents, which is he's definitely tried to glorify AOC and Sanders without really pointing out the really serious contradictions with supporting the Democratic Party and with the nature of imperialism. It doesn't seem like he really, his priority is really to address the contradictions of imperialism, just to point out some of the worst atrocities of imperialism, like the Iraq War, and one of his films is Where to Invade Next, where he goes to a bunch of European countries and points out these good social programs that they have. So I guess we should his point was that the United States should have these social programs as well, but built off but underneath this glorification of AOC and glorification of Scandinavia that's characteristic of American progressives like him is the fact that all this Scandinavian European wealth is built off of imperialism, and justice won't be achieved until imperialism is truly addressed. So it's kind of vapid and surface level. The whole, which is to say, social democracy, I feel is vapid and surface level and not revolutionary.
Absolutely. Moving right along. Next is how to prepare for the prospect of guerrilla warfare in the U.S. And I will be back in just a few minutes. I'm just taking a short break while you present this. I've already read the article and I know what you're going to say. So let's see. Take it away, Rainer.
Look at the history of Cuba. Look at how, in the lead up to Cuba's liberation from the capitalist Batista dictatorship and the start of Cuba's socialist development, Cuba underwent a series of social upheavals that culminated in a period of guerrilla warfare between the proletarian movement and the Batista dictatorship, and this was really inevitable. The socialists in Cuba couldn't have won any other way than through guerrilla warfare, and it was really incredible when you look at how much the Batista regime's forces outnumbered the revolutionaries at a certain point, and even then the Batista forces were they kept having to retreat a lot of the time because of how effective the revolutionaries were able to make their guerrilla warfare. So the caveat is that the Batista regime's forces were being weakened at the time by a U.S. arms embargo, but still, this story shows how powerful guerrilla warfare can be when it's correctly applied, when the revolutionaries are able to avoid fatal mistakes that can lead to their demise. And of course, they won in the end, and Cuba has been socialist since. And similar stories are present in the histories of the socialist revolution in Russia, in China, in Vietnam, Korea, and as well as many of the anti-colonial liberation movements, like the one in South Africa, where the revolutionary fighters were in fact helped by the Castro government appropriately. So, looking at this history, it's clear that in the United States, where the capitalist state is so militarized and so willing to use force against anybody who even mildly defies this evil paradigm of imperialism and neoliberalism, I think it's inevitable that in the United States, the struggle for socialism is going to, at some point, involve guerrilla warfare. The people are at some point going to have to address the great power that the state has to wield violence. So we need to take the state's monopoly on violence away from them by equipping ourselves for the types of guerrilla tactics that Cuba's revolutionaries were able to carry out. And we can we can do this by, first of all, taking all the necessary precautions by reading up on histories like the one I just mentioned, and by reading up on the pitfalls that guerrilla fighters can fall into. These pitfalls, as you can imagine, are they really involve recklessness. They involve being too hasty to attack, to attack the enemy when the enemy is most angry, to overestimate the strength of the guerrilla forces, or even to underestimate the strength of the guerrilla forces. So what you're going to need is is not just the proper arming and training of the revolutionary groups, but a series of military analysts who can correctly assess the strength of the enemy in a given location compared to the strength of your guerrilla cell. And for now, I don't see guerrilla warfare breaking out within the next year or couple years, but with the way that capitalism is collapsing in the United States right now, who the hell knows what this country is going to look like 10 years from now? Who knows what's going to happen in the coming years? So if you're a communist, if you've committed to reading revolutionary theory, if you've committed to the ideas of proletarian revolution and anti-colonial revolution on this continent, you need to arm your groups. You need to get prepared for combat, and just as important, I think, is attaining a sense of military analysis, so that you can make the right tactical moves, so that you won't make the fatal mistakes that could doom your movement.
Excuse me. Okay. Yeah. First of all, great article. I enjoyed reading it. I think it has some valuable stuff to say. And I have to say right off the top, I think, and I have said for decades, that the left, the communist and socialist left, the workers, the workers of the United States, which are far ahead of us in this regard, need to arm ourselves in defense, just as Malcolm X said. And we need to form our own militias, worker militias, communist militias, communist groups, socialist groups. We need to form our own militias for the purpose of defense, because we are being attacked. We have been attacked. We will be attacked. Our demonstrations are attacked. That's primary, that's number one. Number two, I do not think that it's very possible. I mean, you could probably quantify it, maybe some tiny little chance if things were to go in a certain way. But anytime in the foreseeable future, I don't think there's any chance that in the United States, any revolutionary period will form up in the way that it formed up in third world countries, like 70 years ago in China, or more than 50 years ago in Cuba, which were both third world agrarian societies at the time. In those societies, guerrilla warfare, guerrilla tactics were all important. Hell, Mao is read in American military academies today, even in West Point and Colorado Springs and Annapolis. Mao is read because he's considered the expert, the global expert on guerrilla warfare tactics. we should know what Mao said. We should read Mao's works on guerrilla tactics, just as our enemies, just as our class enemies are doing right now. In Colorado Springs, in Annapolis, in West Point, they're reading it. We should be reading it. Yeah. However, I think that the outcome of a more traditional revolution, a revolution that depends on two things, on the masses of workers and on the ranks in the military. Those are the two crucial items that have made revolutions in 85% of the cases in the last 100 years, successful socialist revolutions, bringing over the rank and file of the military. And believe me, those are mostly working class kids. There's some middle class kids in there who will be probably most likely, be fucked up, but mostly working class kids who, when push comes to shove, when they see their working class brothers and sisters and mothers and fathers and sons and daughters and cousins, their neighbors, being attacked by these right-wing forces, which we see constantly when the working class comes out into the streets, the ranks will be with us. I am confident of that. However, we've got to do what the Bolsheviks did, and that is to actively enter the U.S. military with a conscious effort to win them over to the idea of revolution. Same thing in unions across America. We need to be in those unions as communists. We need to go in those unions where there are workers and fight for our revolutionary ideas, because I'll guarantee you, most people don't understand, most people don't realize or know, but most of the major national unions in the United States are led by, or have misleaderships of the Social Democrats in two major organizations, the DSA, which we've mentioned in the past, Democratic Socialists of America, and the Social Democrats USA. Those two organizations run at least 85% of our unions. Communist Party runs, I think, two of our unions. So, I mean, nothing, in other words. Two crucial unions, the electrical workers and the West Coast dock workers. So that's pretty important, but it's not enough. And that's the Communist Party, which has its head up the ass of the Democrat Party. So not much help there anyway. But our road to revolution, in my opinion, in my humble opinion, is going to require worker militias to defend us against fascist attacks. However, and that's why I say good on you for doing this article. However, I do not believe for a moment that there any chance in hell that I'm ever going to see a revolution in the United States where we've become guerrilla fighters. That's really, I don't believe that's in the cards. If something really, I mean, a nuclear exchange between Russia and China on the one side and America on the other, that might cause there to be that kind of situation where we need guerrilla warfare. You're right in saying that we should be prepared, that we should have militias. We should have militias anyway because we need defense. However, tactically too, I want to say one thing from our history. In the 1940s, communists from the U.S., from the Communist Party USA, from the Socialist Party, from the Workers' Party, from the Socialist Workers' Party, communists were arrested and imprisoned on charges of treason in the 1940s. They were put in prison for long prison sentences, many of them overturned in the early 1950s by the Supreme Court, but they were put in prison simply because they called for the violent overthrow of the U.S. government and the U.S. state. Well, I don't call for that. I never have. I call for the overthrow of the U.S. government and the United States, but not the violent overthrow. I call for this through strikes, general strikes, through marches, through hitting the streets, whatever. That's a tactical issue. We don't say, that we're in favor of a violent revolution to overthrow the U.S. government. You will be thrown in jail if you do, if someone brings it to the wrong authority's attention. So that's a caveat that we should always consider when speaking in a public discourse. However, yeah, we should be prepared for any eventuality, for any defense that we need. The communist and socialist left in the United States really needs to get its act together on this issue. In the 1930s, we had militias. In the 1930s, we had defensive forces. What happened to them? Well, I think the Popular Front, like with everything else in the communist and socialist movements, the Popular Front had a lot to do with, undermining that and getting rid of it. But yeah, that's in our tradition, and we should have it again. So good on you, Rainer, for raising this issue. Hopefully people are discussing it. Hopefully people are going out and buying guns and arming themselves, because that's what we really need right now. We need defense. Malcolm always said, be respectful, be polite to everyone. Don't ever throw the first punch, but if somebody hits you, send them to hell. And I agree with Malcolm. Anything more on that?
No.
Okay, let's see where we're at. We have, the top 6 U.S. tech titans lose over $1 trillion on Wall Street sell-off in one day. This was last Tuesday. The phenomenal sell-off. It hit the whole tech sector, but these top 6 titans lost a fuckload of money. Amazon, I believe they lost more than $100 million in total value. Don't worry about Jeff Bezos. He's still the richest man in the world. But Amazon lost a lot of money. Let's see, what were some of the others? Microsoft lost a lot of money. Google, Alphabet Corp, which owns Google, they lost a lot, tens or maybe in some cases hundreds of billions of dollars in value. Let's see, some of the others. I'm sure I just mentioned Oracle. I'm sure they're one of them, but they weren't mentioned as one of the six titans, the six tech titans. Telsa was another one, the electric car company and electric fuel cell company. They were a big loser. Facebook, another. I don't know if I've named all six, but you guys get the idea.
Google, two.
Yeah, I didn't I already say Google? That was Alphabet. Alphabet owns Google.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, Alphabet Corp. Google, yes, Google was one of them too. You are correct, sir.
This is notable because Amazon and Google are some of the only places where capitalist profits in this topsy-turvy year of 2020 have still been funneling upwards, where profits have still been positive. So many other capitalists besides Bezos have been losing out, and investment has been suffering. And I'm trying to figure out why all of a sudden all this wealth among these tech companies has been lost. I don't know how Wall Street dynamics work. It's so confusing and convoluted. But apparently they betted too high, like they overextended their claim to investment. I like I said, this stuff confuses me. It's designed to be confusing, but I'm trying to figure out, where did this wealth go? Is there some? It seems so arbitrary.
Yeah, those are all great questions. Those are the kind of questions people should be asking. The fact is that the stock markets and other financial markets, they used to be really good indicators of what was happening in the economy as a whole, but they are no longer that. They no longer function as really good indicators, as we've seen in the last year or two, when we've been in a fucking Great Depression, the greatest depression, and the stock market's been going pretty good, gaining quite a lot. There's a couple of issues here. Number one is helicopter money, which I've spoke of in the past. Quantitative easing. The Fed, the Federal Reserve System, which is a private cooperative organization owned by its member banks. It is not owned by the United States of America, even though the U.S. Senate appoints its chairwoman, or today it's a chairwoman. The Fed has this when COVID-19 first started, and of course the Greatest Depression had already begun in February, and this was in March, middle of March. In February, the Greatest Depression had already begun. And how do we know that? Because there's an organization, an adjunct of the federal government, which determines when we are in recession. They call a depression recession, but in recession. And in May or June, one of those months, they declared that as of February, our economy had gone into a recession. Now, that's doublespeak that's capitalist pig doublespeak. In reality, what that means is that the double dip in the long depression, which started in 2008, that double dip began in February, prior to there being a COVID-19 crisis, prior to COVID being declared a pandemic, prior to its being a pandemic. So obviously there was big problems with the economy before COVID. COVID exacerbated it. COVID still exacerbates it. Still, the problems are systemic. The problems are built into the capitalist system, as Marx explained more than a century and a half ago. These cyclical downturns come every 5 to 10 years. So it's not as though this was a big surprise. The last one, started in 2008, and they're saying, "Oh, what a great recovery when we went to 2020 without another recession." Well, that's just bullshit, because we were in a deep depression that entire time. We never got out of it. The recovery was in idiotic casinos like the stock market. That isn't the real economy, and people know exactly what I'm talking about. Working class people know that since the 2008 financial meltdown globally, the economy has sucked for working class people. It's been in a depression. That's the reality. The unemployment, of course, is always at least twice what they claim it is. In my opinion, right now, it's about 3 times what they claim, the capitalist class, the American government, the American state claim it is. So we are in really deep doo-doo. Back to this helicopter money. Starting in March, the Fed decided to shower $3.5 trillion down on the huge banks and a couple of the largest Fortune 500 megacorps. That's helicopter money. You just shower it. It's like Santa Claus is coming to town. And he's raining money off his sleigh. And that money has greatly distorted the market, because these banks are then having to try to inject this money into the economy, and they have not done so. They're mostly just sitting on it, or they're definitely not making investments in real production, because there's a crisis of overproduction in the United States and in the world today. The capitalists have created more commodities than they can sell. So investing in production to create more commodities that they won't be able to sell doesn't make a lot of sense to the average banker or the average capitalist investor. Doesn't make a lot of sense, so they don't. They do invest in the stock market if they see something that they think is going to still make money, like Amazon, like Facebook, like Microsoft, on and on, like Oracle, for example. The tech sector has been carrying the stock market since January. That's no doubt. But it's starting to dawn on the heads of the idiots who do the investing that these companies are incredibly overvalued on the stock market. The stock market makes the claim that these companies, for example, I saw a statistic yesterday that proves this point, that this statistic showed that Tesla, this tiny little electric car company, is valued at more than GM, Ford Motors, Chrysler, Daimler, what do they call it? Chrysler, Audi, I guess it's called now, or what? It's got some other, the Italian, the Chrysler. Those 3 companies, which are the giants, they say that Tesla is worth more than those 3 giants combined. Well, that's just absurd. If you took apart all the pieces of those 4 companies if you put the three giants in a big pile and then you put Tulsa in another pile next to it, Tulsa's pile would be like 1,000th of the size of the three, GM, Ford, Chrysler pile. It's just fucking ridiculous. Well, that's the problem we have in the stock market today, when we have investors who've been showered with all this money that they don't know what to do with. They just keep piling it into things that made the money in the past, like Elon Musk. Man, that guy's always reliable to turn a profit. He'll show us. He'll give us back what we put in. Finally, these idiots have figured out this is absurd to be investing, to continue to invest in these companies that are already like 100 times overvalued to what their real value is. I believe that's what's happened last Tuesday and what's happening now in the stock market. So we'll see. Anything more on that?
No, other than I like the presentation you just gave. I'm glad to be able to give you this platform through my YouTube channel.
Good. I appreciate it, Rainer.